The plans as published do not state how much glass this factory will produce or the size of the furnace, but the documents we've managed to find on Xinyi's website in China say the plan is for 2,000 metric tons per day. This will release 271 million kilograms of carbon dioxide into the sky above Stratford, and the process of actually heating the raw materials also releases CO2, about another 91 million kilograms. Another document on the Xinyi website notes that some Chinese float glass plants in China are closing because they do not meet China's air quality guidelines. Ontario will actually only catch up to China in 2023 for nitrous oxide and sulfur oxides, but China's standard for particulate matter is already better than Ontario and will continue to be. And China, because of its problem with smog, is now imposing new and very tough restrictions on nitrous oxides, sulfur dioxides, and particulates. Now, I guess we're breathing stuff all the time. The issue is that when you are heating chemicals in a furnace at such incredible temperatures, stuff sticks to the particles. A diesel engine that has lots of particles has lots of carcinogens in those particles. And so there are limits to how much particles that they can now emit. Those are new limits that haven't been imposed yet. So these numbers look good. There's been no dispersion. Someone asked, has there been a dispersion modeling document given out by Xinyi? No. We don't know where these particles are going to go. Has there been any actual quantification of the amount of particles that will be emitted? No. We know it'll be a lot. As far as the question City Council should ask, they should ask for the actual air studies, including dispersion modeling for Stratford. They should ask for PM1 and PM.1 modeling too, even though the province doesn't regulate that. It's certainly something I'm interested in. The original plan was for a workers' dormitory of 48 small apartments. This was rejected in Guelph-Aramosa. The ministerial zoning order, though, that was issued this July, specified a dormitory, but it was called an emergency preparedness center. Now, I phoned a number of float glass manufacturers in the US and Europe. None of them have an emergency preparedness center, nor do any workers have any living quarters on site. Dormitories are standard practice for Xinyi in China and Malaysia, as the workers generally live at the factory. There is no guarantee, nor do we know how many temporary foreign workers Xinyi has applied for from the federal government. A very vague description of when Canadian recruitment would occur. It appears that in 2022, they intend to hire between 20 and 40 Canadian jobs, Canadian individuals, mainly for manufacturing, sales and marketing, and supply chain. Then in 2023, they talk about continue recruitment and training, but there's no indication of whether they're going to hire anybody. In 2024, they indicate they're going to hire another 30 skilled workforces. So we have a commitment of between 50 and 70 that would be recruited and hired from within, but there's between 320 and 380 jobs here. So where do the rest come from? It appears they're going to come from China. So this is Xinyi's corporate structure. It's a web of companies, corporations, that are, the Xinyi Glass Holdings Limited is based in the Cayman Islands, and each of the directors of that corporation are actually corporations themselves registered in the British Virgin Islands. Through the Panama Papers, we found this little map, and we figured out the structure and the names of the directors. Some of the directors are members of Communist Party committees. Recent changes to China's laws require corporations, all of them, to have a Communist Party committee, and that this committee will make all major decisions. So there are some questions as a result of all this, and I've barely touched the surface of what this really means. Will this company be run by a Communist Party committee? How many temporary foreign workers did the company apply for, and for how long, and what job titles? And will the company give binding guarantees on which jobs will be filled by local hires and when? And I hope that our council will ask these questions of Xinyi on Monday, and I'll be watching to see what the answers are. Thank you. The glassmaking factories require a lot of water. And this is Xinyi's own estimation of what they will require. 1 million cubic meters per year. And Stratford uses 3.6 million cubic meters per year currently. So this is a quarter, a little more than a quarter, of Stratford's current use. And people have said, though nobody has actually proved it, that there is lots of water in the aquifer, so don't worry. Well, nobody's actually studied that, not for this proposal. They claim it's only 10% of the existing water supply, but nobody's actually shown us where those studies are. Recent studies, not studies done 15 years ago by the ministry. And the other problem with it is that Stratford has to build a new water main, a full-size water main to service Xinyi, and they will have to treat the water because it'll be potable water. During the December 3rd meeting, Xinyi was asked, some people remember, that there were once upon a time, years and years ago, water restrictions in Stratford. And Xinyi was asked what would happen in the event of water restrictions as a result of a future drought. Their answer was, those restrictions wouldn't apply to Xinyi, they would apply to the rest of Stratford. I couldn't believe the gall of this company saying, if we suck too much water out of the aquifer, you'll have to conserve, you'll have to drink less. Just unbelievable.
This is a water question. Is there an alternative to potable water? Is there an alternative for the plant to use? Is there other kind of water they could use than potable water?
What we have indicated is this is not an appropriate site because they have to use potable water. What is an appropriate site is not farmland, but a brownfield site somewhere else in Ontario where there is plentiful source groundwater, where the water that is already on the ground in the form of a pond, in the form of puddles, doesn't matter, just something that's already above the surface of the earth. We don't have that here in Stratford. Well, except for the Avon River, what we have is an aquifer that we suck water out of in order to give ourselves drinking water. And that's what they intend to use to run this plant. So far, the consultants have defined this as a medium-sized industry. Now you can see from this picture, there's nothing medium about this. It's pretty enormous. But there's a reason that they want to define it as a medium-sized industry and not heavy industry under the rules of the province. Because the zone of influence of the plant for a medium-sized industry is 300 meters. The zone of influence for a plant that is a large industry, a heavy industry, is 1,000 meters. There's a whole bunch more people will be affected by this if it's classified properly. Can you show the next slide, please? I have some criteria. So one of the things that the definition of a class 3 or heavy industry is that there are continuous movements of products and employees, which Xinyi says it has, and that there is a large production level, which Xinyi says that it has. So they admit that they meet the class 3 definition, but for some reason they don't want to be defined as that. I think the town council better ask those questions.
The question asked here is Area 6 meant for a phase 2 development?
It would certainly lend itself to another float glass plant, quite easily. You can see that it fits in that size, and it's apparently part of the land that's being purchased by Xinyi. So it wouldn't surprise me that they plan, once they get this one up and running, to put another one there. The council could not say once council approves this, council could not say anything more about an addition to this plan, because the land has now been zoned for glass manufacturing, and there is no way for council to stop an expansion.
Now, Mike, you're going to read in a moment, you're going to read a couple of motions to us, a couple of resolutions. So the Energy and Environment Committee of Stratford, and you might in a moment give us a little context about who that committee is. They met and considered this proposal, and they've passed a couple of motions. So Mike, just introduce the committee to us and the resolutions that they passed.
So I apologize in advance for not knowing their names yet. But this is a committee of councillors and citizens whose job it is to give Stratford Council recommendations on how best and wisest to deal with energy and environment issues. And my understanding is that last week, that committee, which I wasn't a member of then, but I am now apparently, moved and seconded that Xinyi be required to submit a greenhouse gas emissions report prior to council making a final decision, and that the Energy and Environment Advisory Committee recommends that council rejects the glass plant proposal based on the current standards proposed by Xinyi due to environmental concerns. That motion was carried by the Energy and Environment Committee and presented to council.